Episode 626. The core message of that speech really stirred up a wave of support from Glory players back then. And at that time, Glory had just launched the Heavenly Domain, so they were eager to promote and announce this new feature. Glory players were undoubtedly a huge draw, so there wasn't much trouble on that front. Player support, the game company's leniency, and the Heavenly Domain being open to pro players. All of that was settled from the very beginning. In the early days, the beautiful blueprint the Alliance chairman had described did come to pass. As it turned out, pro players were among the very first batch of characters to enter the Heavenly Domain. In the Heavenly Domain, ordinary players really could play alongside pro players on a regular basis. But as Glory continued to grow, with more players joining and the map expanding, professional players became increasingly popular. That blueprint from back then is hard to come by now. Pro players didn't dare log in with their pro accounts, no league ban needed for that. They wouldn't risk it themselves. The sheer volume of onlookers meant that any pro character who logged in could barely get anything done. The crowd was only part of it. Sometimes, pro players even got ganged up on. Whether it was the chance to fight a pro player or the greed for their gear, no one could say for sure. In the end, all those different mindsets meant that during the current golden age of Glory Esports, the beautiful vision of interactive cooperation once described had already vanished. Nowadays, pro players only really surface when they're going for a peak record. And so, the leaderboards of every dungeon in the Heavenly Domain were etched with their names. And of course, their goal in setting those records was nothing more than to claim the resources awarded for doing so. Once you reached the Heavenly Domain, competition between the major guilds boiled down to a bare-knuckled scramble for resources, a blatant, no-holds-barred game of grabbing cash. The same went for dungeon records, and even more so for wild bosses. And then there are materials, all kinds of materials. In the pro scene, materials are worth far more than equipment. For a game like Glory, which isn't bound to any specific server region, getting your hands on any piece of equipment that drops from monsters isn't all that difficult. Only self-made equipment, this high-end stuff, was the ultimate pursuit of the top-tier professional circle. And self-made equipment always demands a steady supply of materials. In Glory, materials drop from every activity in the game. Their grade isn't what matters. Drop rate is the true measure of their value. Naturally, the exclusive materials dropped by certain wild field bosses were the most valuable of all. A mere 52 units produced per year. If you needed it for a custom piece of equipment, that meant only 52 chances to fail per year. And that's assuming you could secure the entire annual output. How could such a material not be expensive? And equipment forged from such materials, how could it not be powerful? The level 65 field boss, the Wilderness Outlaw, dropped a unique revolver, the Wildfire. In the hands of an ordinary player, Wildfire was already a remarkably valuable weapon in its own right. But in the pro scene, level 65 weapons usually don't even make the cut. Still, these pieces could come in handy for crafting custom gear, though the weapon category is pretty narrow in scope. Take Wildfire, for example. No matter how broad its range, it can never exceed the scope of gun-type weapons. Less use means less demand, and naturally, a lower value. But even at its lowest, as long as it was unique, it was still more precious than those relatively common rare materials dropped in dungeons. So, in the end, you still have to fight for it. Even if a team has no gunner class at all, making the gun completely worthless, getting your hands on it still gives you a bargaining chip. At the very least, it weakens whoever needs it. That's just how competition in the professional circle trickles down.
Come on, why aren't they fighting?
The player Fragrant Shadows in the Walls couldn't hold back any longer, spamming the chat with shouts.
The Desperado isn't top tier in value, and the stuff it drops is pretty limited in practicality. How will the major guilds handle it?
Yi Shu, however, was thinking rationally.
What can you see lying in that hole?
I thought you were more familiar with that hole than I was.
I'm just more familiar with crawling through it.
Dark Fragrance Shadow said as he reached the dog hole and stuck his head in, trying to get a look at what was happening outside. The fight outside hadn't stopped, but it was clear the Blue Creek Pavilion members were just holding the Wilderness Outlaws aggro. If a full-scale PK had broken out, there's no way it would be this quiet.
Won't he be discovered like that?
No, there's a pile of grass blocking the cave entrance outside too.
So he can't see anything at all?
There might be a gap in the haystack.
Disdainful, so pathetic.
Meanwhile, the Dawn Frost of the Blue Creek Pavilion was also feeling a bit helpless. They'd had the advantage, but today their luck ran out. 9 attempts, and they still couldn't pull off what they wanted. Now the competitors had caught up. With both guilds matching their numbers, a direct PK would be suicide. The one speaking to him with that sarcastic tone was a member of the Chinese Herbal Hall named Ai Shi. Shuguang Xuanbing knew this guy too. He was considered someone of note in the Herbal Hall. Activities like killing a boss always invite competition, so no guild would just throw together a random group and charge in. They always need a leader to call the shots. On the Jia dynasty side, that was Meng Tianchen, one of their top experts, a core member. It was always someone of his caliber leading the charge.
You two are a bit late.
Dawn Frost also exchanged greetings with the two guild leaders.
I think I'm starting to see what Brother Dawnfrost is getting at here.
As Ai Shi spoke, the guild system was well structured. Below the guild leader came the vice leaders, then the various raid leaders. These positions carried real weight. They weren't just handed out casually among friends or given to whoever was strongest. They were held by the guild's true core members. Shuguang Xuanbing was ranked among the Blue Creek Pavilion's 5 great experts. Whether that title truly reflected his skill level was debatable, but when it came to his position within the guild, his standing was genuinely high. To be fair, his standing was a cut above both Ai Shi and Meng Tianchen. He was practically a big shot in his own right.
Is that so?
Shuguang Xuanbing's reply sounded casual, but his gaze had already shifted toward the two guilds, not the dog hole behind him. But just then, the sound of the falling flower palm echoed from behind him.
What?
The sound made Yi Shu jolt. The next thing he knew, Anshang Shuying, who had his head stuck in the dog hole, shot out like a cannonball, tumbled across the ground a few times, and slammed straight into the wall. The channel was still scrolling with text.
Holy crap. Holy crap.
Is this really happening?
Yishu quickly dropped to the ground and peered into the hole. Even he was stunned by what he saw.